And we're live. So it says. I
I'm live.
am apt to believe it. Here, let's make that big and such.
Is my hair live?
Your hair is always live.
Live.
And I'm Ani. I'm here with Teresa. And in just a moment or two, we will go live, go livelier. We need more light. Unfortunately, we smashed a light moments before we went live.
Whoopsies.
And now I'm looking around going, it's not so light.
So light.
What about that light? The light that you're not so wild about.
Well,
but it's light.
Yeah, I could probably plug it into the computer. See what it does.
Oh, Yoba!
That's how I broke the other one.
Wasn't quite how you broke the other one.
Pretty close.
It was very close to how you broke the other one. Anyways, we gather together.
Together.
We hope you do too. And we'll be right with you.
You know how it is when you fumble one thing and then everything gets fumbly?
Teresa's having a fumbling kind of morning.
All right, there's light, sort of.
It's a little bit lighter. It's kind of light.
It's a really cute light.
Yeah,
I'll show it to you.
Yeah, man.
Already gave it to me. Isn't that cute? It says Teresa Ani has our anniversary.
It does. Because I'm a romantic like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Shall we start to move forward?
I suppose so, yeah.
In a way. How are you this morning, Teresa? We'll just take another moment.
I'm, I'm alive. I feel pretty good.
All right. Good.
Yeah.
Well, here we are, coming up just before the holiday of Imbolc, one of my favorite holidays. We can talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. But we are looking at the beginning of spring, depending on how you cut up calendars. The end of what do we call that? Or some people think this is the middle of winter. I like to think beginning of spring.
Yeah.
Personally.
Like pre-game spring.
Yeah.
It's supposed to get pretty frosty this weekend here.
Well, it tends to, I think. For the last several years, we've had very, very cold Februarys. So it's we're 3 minutes in. Let's just start, shall we? Let's do it.
Leave Clocky over here then.
Don't worry, Clocky will tick on.
Okay. Good morning. The name of this program is This Is Now a Bridge to a Better World. I'm Teresa.
I'm Ani.
That's Ani. And we'll start off with the brief headlines. An article in Vice by Paul Blest points out that President Biden has yet to move on his promised amnesty for brutal marijuana convictions issued during the generations-long war on drugs. Blest writes, the pardon application for federal simple possession cannabis convictions is still not yet available on the Department of Justice website, more than 3 months after President Joe Biden announced the pardons as part of one of the most significant shifts in federal cannabis policy in decades. Biden said in an October 6th proclamation that he would issue the pardons and encouraged state governors to follow suit. Department of Justice spokesperson Anthony Coley said at the time that the DOJ would expeditiously administer the president's proclamation, but as yet, there's crickets. And Zach Dorfman, Sean Naylor, and Michael Isikoff wrote in 2017 in Yahoo, they wrote in 2017, as Julian Assange began his fifth-year holdup in Ecuador's embassy in London, the CIA plotted to kidnap the WikiLeaks founder, spurring heated debate among Trump administration officials over the legality and practicality of such an operation. Some senior officials inside the CIA and the Trump administration even discussed killing Assange, going so far as to request sketches or options for how to assassinate him. Discussions over kidnapping or killing Assange occurred at the highest levels of the Trump administration, according to a senior counterintelligence official, former senior counterintelligence official. He said there seemed to be no boundaries. pardon me. The conversations were part of an unprecedented CIA campaign directed against WikiLeaks and its founder. This is where I have to depart from the text and say, unprecedented? What kind of Pollyanna shit is this? I mean, come on, Isikoff? I can't believe Isikoff is writing this stuff. They ever hear of Diem or Lumumba or a cast of thousands? The CIA is an assassination agency on top of a secret war agency. Unprecedented? But anyway, pardon me for wandering on. They write, the agency's multi-pronged plans also included extensive spying on WikiLeaks associates, sowing discord among the group's members, and stealing their electronic devices. Nice, huh? So, if you hear Biden rattling on about free speech and democracy, well, not really. I guess, well, this is Trump administration, so we can say that Trump is that much worse. But all those years of CIA non-oversight under Biden come to mind as well. And you have something to say about the current police state.
So I have found the statement from Code Pink about the killing of Tortuguita, the activist in Atlanta, by the police last week. So on January 18th, and I'll just read the statement from Code Pink. On January 18th, Tortuguita, a brave and beloved Weelaunee forest defender, was killed by Atlanta police. As people of conscience, as breathers of air, as anti-imperialists, as feminists, pacifists, and activists, we condemn this state-sanctioned murder. Manuel Esteban Pez Terán, aka Tortuguita, is the victim of an expanding and increasingly militarized machine of state violence, suppression, and racist policing, as well as environmental destruction. Activists in the Stop Cop City movement have put their bodies on the line to protect the Weelaunee forest from the development of a monster urban policing training center. If constructed, it will equip thousands of police units from across the country to replicate and escalate the deadly and racist tactics employed by modern American law enforcement institutions. It's sadly unsurprising, too, that Cop City will facilitate Atlanta Police's continued exchange of militarized police tactics with the Israeli police force, itself an arm of racialized state violence and repression. The construction of Cop City would raise the Weelaunee Forest, home for millennia to the original forest defenders, the Muskogee people, who were illegally and lethally forced out of their territory by the United States. The current residents of the area surrounding the Weelaunee Forest, largely Black Americans, are overwhelmingly opposed to the Cop City project, which would destroy the most crucial carbon store in the area and would only serve to supercharge the deadly policing apparatus. The state of Georgia has already charged more than a dozen forest defenders with domestic terrorism. They've charged them with domestic terrorism for occupying the forest, showing the extent to which our government is prepared to escalate against activists with wartime rhetoric and suppression tactics. There is a tragic, inescapable irony to this charge. When a living forest is under threat of total destruction, when lives are stolen in the name of justice, when those killed are disproportionately Black and brown men, when armed forces are deployed to expedite deadly resource extraction and accelerate the climate crisis, we ask, who are the real domestic terrorists? Forests are the lungs of the earth. Every tree felled for major development robs our planet of its natural ability to release oxygen into the atmosphere and store carbon in the soil. This knowledge is what drives the forest defenders to put their bodies on the line, just as environmental activists the world over resist and disrupt systemic deforestation, which is linked to indigenous displacement and to fascist governments. It has become tragically commonplace to hear of land defenders and environmental activists in Colombia, Brazil, Mexico, the Philippines, and Honduras being killed or their bold defiance for their bold defiance of environmental destruction. Tortuguita's killing must shock us into action and guide our demands to ensure that no more activists are killed, whether here in North America or across the global South, for their acts of conscience. Particularly, this killing must serve as a wake-up call to those in climate movements who have not yet drawn the connections between natural resource extraction and the rampant U.S. militarism which threatens people and their environments here and abroad. Code Pink stands with the Walani forest defenders who are risking their freedom and lives to prevent an appalling misappropriation of $90 million. We recognize that the cost of Cop City is not only the unacceptable destruction of the forest and the militarization of the police. Cop City is part and parcel of this country's perennial failure to prioritize healthcare over police, green jobs over nukes, working families over Wall Street, indigenous communities over oil profits. In short, it is failing to choose life over death. Tortuguita's killing is a testament to a broader sickness in American policy, and as we call for an end to deadly U.S. intervention abroad, we join in calls to bring it to a halt here at home. R.I.P. Tortuguita. Stop Cop City.
Oh, nicely delivered.
And that is Code Pink's statement on the killing of Tortuguita, an activist with the Stop Cop City forest defenders in outside of Atlanta.
Hi, John. Hi, Jabara. Well, that actually wraps things together tighter than I realized. It also makes me think of Judy Berry a lot. Was that 1990 the FBI bombed her?
No, it was slightly later.
Pretty close. Anyway, well, I suppose y'all know about Judy Berry, but that's one of the things that brought me up to the Northwest. It directed my attention. I wanted to, see and be a part of what was happening in the forests. And I met an interesting witch at the radio station.
Did you know?
I've been hanging out with her. When I think back on my long life, and I consider the prosperity once available to the workers of the USA, I feel saddened and frustrated. Decades ago, reactionary conspiracists, evil rich men in the orbit of Barry Goldwater and later Ronald Reagan, decided that American workers were getting too much money. And I should add, in that frame around 1964, they were only talking about cis white men. Unions had successfully leveraged the mobilization for the World War and the tensions of the Cold War into a far more equitable distribution of wealth than had been seen in a capitalist society. And the wealth of the U.S. worker was legendary at that time. The plutocrats looked at the desperation of workers that they remembered from the Gilded Age and that they could plainly see in places that were more profitable to them, like Guatemala and New Delhi at the time. And they wanted that misery for the American labor. And when I say they wanted that misery, I'm not using polemics. I'm really talking about a very sick dynamic in our rulers. It's sadistic. They are sadists, and I don't mean in the fun way. They were motivated by greed, to be sure, but to a much greater degree, they are motivated by the foulest spite. That money was theirs, they were certain, and so they mobilized using their titanic reserves of wealth, pardon me, attacking the hearts and minds of workers via their holdings in the press. And I remember some of those, they seemed like feeble efforts at the time. I remember the little mobile op-ed that would pop up in the paper. They paid senators and Congress critters, to be sure, and their meddling went deep and far. Funding for education, which had briefly expanded in the years after the Sputnik launch, was dialed back with efforts like Proposition 13 in California, Jarvis's little thing, which broke ground on the successful use of resentment politics.
I'm just going to invite you into the center of the screen.
Okay. It's nice to be invited. Pardon me.
Sorry, I didn't mean to break your chain of thought.
Broke ground on the successful use of resentment politics to get workers to vote against their own interests. And resentment politics was the mother lode. That is what really motivated Americans Roger Ailes came along eventually and started Fox News, openly admitting that the intent was to destroy the working class. Even bankruptcy was destroyed for the worker. Decades later, we Americans find ourselves in a dystopia, a worker's hell, the opposite of 1964, in which one may only access higher education via gigantic and usurious loans. And once that education is gained, sky-high housing costs, inaccessible mortgages, and low wages force the unlucky worker into a life of precarity. One illness, one injury, one angry and unjust action by an employer can result in a computer-tracked blackballing for life, and that can easily lead to desperation and houselessness, and does. Meanwhile, even adequate medicine is out of reach for many, as health denial organizations find devious dodges to prevent the dispensation of effective care, despite taking the more money than any other country for healthcare. Seeing this, I have to ask, why are we collectively unable to see this? And why do we, and I mean the whole society, why do we obey and even praise a system that is so cruel that it leads to widespread despair, madness, and violence? And the madness part is really sad. And it has to do with the denial that we're encouraged to maintain. We find no way out and we descend into self-harm. But I ask only rhetorically because it's manifestly clear to me. It is painfully obvious that we are cruelly brainwashed and so deprived of truth and hope that we accept the hopeless. And yes, it makes me very angry. But anger isn't entirely a bad thing. To be sure, it is a survival trait that should be reserved for dire emergencies. But I can't think of a worse emergency than our pitiful clanking fetters to a corporate system that is hell-bent on worsening human misery unto the destruction of the entire living globe. I need to be honest about another reason why we obey. We have been intimidated by armed force. I don't mean just the police, which demonstrated as they crushed the anguished cries of justice for Black Americans that they can weather any degree of protest and come out with more power and funding than before. I mean, the COINTELPRO inspired destruction of all effective protest and reform movements from the 60s to the 90s. I mean, the assassination of Fred Hampton and Malcolm X and President Kennedy and the bombing of Judy Berry and the unreported retaliation killings by car fires of the BLM organizers in the last couple of years. We have a deep and abiding problem with secret police death squads in the United States today. We have such a problem that we're afraid to say it. So while I'm calling for an immediate resurgence on an emergency basis of all climate justice and liberation movements, I'm also calling for an educated, dynamic, and cautious praxis. Organizers and fundraisers for this new left of the 20s must understand they do not have freedom of association, freedom of speech, nor freedom of the press. This is what we used to call a third world frame. I can only afford to say this much because I am, to some minor degree, a public figure in the greater Portland metropolitan area, and because even so, my influence is so minuscule as to be perceived, probably correctly, as not worth bothering with. The new left must organize swiftly under intense and disciplined secrecy. We all carry electronic snitches in our pockets, and even for those of us who do not, surveillance is everywhere. And this is the important distinction. Artificial intelligence-fueled analysis, detection, and countermeasures are afoot. That means that what I say now, even on this, tiny, hardly watched little vlog, is it's brought together, it's analyzed, it's kept by these computers and by these amazing programs, so that it is not necessary to have a human in the loop until the artificial intelligence programs decide that some attention is necessary. It's amazingly efficient. This new America is, in fact, an intense and unprecedented police state. We must act in that frame and in no other. And so that's what I had to say about, and that's why I was calling this Why Obey. Even though it's intense, even though the abilities of the police state are unprecedented, we cannot afford, are we going to wait until there are no birds, until there are no crops?
It is a state of emergency, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what Code Pink's statement gets around to stating, that we are living in a death cult. This society picks at every turn the commodification of sacred life forces, right? To turn living forests into timber profits, to raise the earth in search of next term's profits, whether that's through the extraction forces, taking the wealth of the earth from the ground, or whether that's clearing the earth for development, so that we can have things like Cop City, so that we can have huge high rises and populate and pave more and more and more of the earth, instead of actually thinking that we have to live cooperatively with this ecosystem that sustains us, right? And so, what do we do about that? As you say, cooperating with it makes no sense. Conforming to the system is really an act of insanity. It is signing our own death warrants. It's speeding up the process. And so resistance is everything. How do we resist? How do we resist in gloriously creative ways? How do we resist and keep joy in our hearts? I think resistance is joyous. And I think that it's important to remember to incorporate joy and fun and love and compassion into all acts of resistance, because, in fact, those attitudes, being joyous, being loving, that in and of itself is an act of resistance to this death cult in which we live.
Yeah, because you and I remember the joy of going out and taking direct action. For example, you smashing the glass of the Christo fascists, me uh, defacing the proud finned missile in front of the ROTC building. And y'all remember things like that too. There's a reason that feels joyous.
I don't think you've ever said that.
Well,
it was a long time ago, people.
Yeah,
a long time ago, when I was young and had an arm that could pitch things.
Yeah.
Still.
I want to call for that resistance. I mean, and this
but I want to call for joy too. I mean, and not just in smashing the glass of well deemed targets. I'm to get back to what I was saying. I don't want it to be erased. I agree. Acts of defiance and direct resistance is important, but also, as you're doing it, that attitude of joy, creativity, love, camaraderie, those things are important.
Super important. And so we're facing possible uprising over these incredibly ugly cop killings. And it is, like Code Pink pointed out, as Ani pointed out, these things are connected. And it's almost poetic that this is happening in Atlanta in the context of a little forest that they want to defend. That's all together. I mean, the flattening of that forest for an ugly little present to the police to compensate them for the inconvenience and mental bother that they felt over being confronted over their grotesque and ongoing racism. That's just so, you just can't make shit like this up. So yeah, it is appropriate to protest, to go out and make your voice heard.
But beyond going out and making your voice heard, making every act of your life an act of defiance, right? How do we, because really resistance is something that we do, but it's also something we are. And so when you were telling me this morning about the name of the show, this is how we divide our labor. I do the little technical setup. Teresa tells me what to call the show this week, and so it's like, as you're saying, yeah, why obey? We can't do that, and I'm like, yes. But with every ounce of our beings through all of our waking lives, it's protesting is not something that we set off to do at some point. I mean, it might be. There's good actions that we can become parts of, but really, everything we do is an act of defiance. Every penny we spend has some meaning. Every every gesture we make, when we decide to embrace life and to have fun and to be irreverent and to be loving and compassionate, and to inspire radical solutions outside of boxes instead of sort of parroting the same tired um, um, non-solutions for age-old problems.
I want to do teach-ins about capitalism. I'm just having this thought. So I'm thinking, how would I do this? Maybe I'll go down to Pioneer Square with my flute and noodle on the flute, and in between that, say, "Let me tell you about what capitalism is." I don't know if that would work, but I want to.
I like the idea. That's
Yeah?
nice. That's creative.
Okay,
I like it.
because people don't know. I mean, and I say, why obey? Well, obedience happens in the context of intimidation when, when things are so crushing. You don't know what's happening, really. All you know is that it's bad and you need to get through it. And so you obey because you can't find a better way. And if people understood what capitalism is and could distinguish it from, as the common thought is that, oh, it's economic activity, without a cop breathing down your neck. No, capitalism is a different thing.
Right.
Capitalism is extracting the value of workers who must
And
obey
the
you.
earth.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an extractive process. It's an inherently exploitive process, one could say.
I
Could
agree.
say. I also want to apologize. I was wrong. You were right.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Yeah.
What day is this?
It's like Christmas Day, Captain. Yeah, Judy Berry. The bombing was in 1990. I was remembering it in 91, but I think that's because I'm older. I
Oh,
think I am.
Doesn't matter.
But
Close
yes, it
enough.
is. It was 1990.
Okay.
Thanks.
Well, what did your card say? This
Oh, are we ready for that then?
yeah, I think.
Okay. Well, looking forward then, this next week brings with it Imbolc. Imbolc is one of my favorite holidays. It's the holiday of initiation, new beginnings. It's also the holiday of writing, fireworking, steelworking, forge work, I guess I should say.
Forge work. Wow.
Yeah, Bridget. Bridget of the Forge, Bridget of the Healing Waters, Bridget of the Fires.
Out of the way, Vulcan.
Anyways, so there's all that. And this is the time of year where we turn that over. And it was as we look at new beginnings, what do we want to create for ourselves? And again, what are we creating for each other? And how are we resisting the mad world in which we find ourselves? How are we creating the new world for each other? That is, of course, how this show was named. This is now Bridge to a Better World, because we know we live in the belly of the beast, but we have to co-create something that is sustainable, that is joyous, that is brighter together. So that was all my preamble, because these are the cards I got today. And for those of you viewing at home, it's the Devil, it's the Ten of Swords inversed, and it's Death. And I looked at those this morning and I went, holy shit, check that out. Those are some heavy-hitting cards. And yet, let's look at them. Before we get into that, I do want to say, please do hit the like button on this video. Let your friends and neighbors know. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. You can find us in the Twitterverse at Bridge #2 Utopia for this particular podcast vloggy stream thing. You can also find me at Ani Raven or at Positive Revolt. You can also find Teresa on the Twitterverse.
Oh, yes. Press watch now. Press watch with a little flat. What do you call the little flat thing? It's a dash, but it's a flat.
Underscore. We call it an underscore.
Press watch underscore now. Because I know things.
So do hit the like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you can, in fact, be informed should we ever decide to do this. At other times, we could. It could break out any moment. And now I have stalled long enough, and I have to get to these cards. The Devil The Ten of Swords inversed and Death. So what do we have here? It is from the Ten of Swords. Let's start there. The Ten of Swords say that we have been through a lot. And I look at these readings sort of collectively for those that are tuning in. What do we need to know? What do we need to focus on for this next week? And this is, as I said, the week that holds Imbolc, the week of initiation. So we've been through a lot, and the worst is kind of over, is what this card is saying. That we have perhaps gone through a lot. We've been hanging on by the last of our nails, and it is now time that we can kind of take a deep breath and go, all right, has the storm passed? I think the storm has passed. And we can just sort of pause for a moment and realize that maybe we don't need to be in flight mode, that we can start to take the nails out of the screen door, that we can, that's the visual.
I had a kitty that would jump on the screen.
Newton, are you thinking of Newton? Because I'm thinking of Newton.
No.
Anyway, I had a cat that would do that quite literally, and the yells that he would make would seem to be about this card. Yes, that but it's passing. We have weathered the storms. And so how are, as we get through trauma, as we get through hard times, really check in and see where you're at with yourself. How are you doing anything that actually hurts you? Are you reining yourself in more than you should? Have you clipped your own wings to try to fit in, to try to navigate the system?
To obey.
Have you, in fact, fallen into a posture of conformity or obedience? That obedience, I suppose, is the word I want. Obedience. That doesn't actually serve you, that doesn't serve your heart, that is in fact constraining you, that is holding you in. Because it is time to not do that anymore. Stop hurting you. It is time to turn it around and to slip your chains, as it were. You can do it. We can support each other in doing it, whether it's bad habits we've fallen into, or just the idea that things aren't really going to get better, things don't change, we're just going along to get along. Any of that stuff is poisonous to the soul. It's poisonous to the spirit. It dulls your creative engines, as it were. It takes away your creative fuel, and you don't need that, right? So think about really taking in the lessons from the hard times we pass through. Think about letting, as the shit is settling, really think about integrating the lessons that you've learned there, and as you integrate them, think about slipping out of the shackles we've made for ourselves. Slip your collar, as this card in particular invites you to just break free of your preconceived notions, and not just preconceived notions, but those coping mechanisms that we make for ourselves. Again, whether it's unhealthy habits of escapism, whether that's the unhealthy attitudes of it's all there is and we're never going to get better, whatever we say to make ourselves smaller so that we think we can fit into roles that we have outgrown, it's time to get rid of that.
So confront the rascally golden Labrador of oppression.
Confront the rascally golden Labrador of oppression. Yes, Teresa.
Okay.
And then ultimately we have death, right? And death is not a literal thing here in Tarot. It is about transition, it is about transformation. And so, as we confront our ideas that keep us smaller, as we confront those things that we need to rid ourselves of, it does invite a total transformation of ourselves, our lives. It invites us to really step into the new cycle of our lives where maybe we don't have to feel like we're hanging on to the screen door with our nails. We are creating our lives, and here we have the newness of the springtime of Imbolc, where we can really kind of springboard off of that energy that is around us right now and into our next chapter, into the next season, into the next cycle. And so that's what I have tarot wise for this week. It is, in fact, time to stop reining yourself in, integrate the lessons from the challenges we've just gotten through, and be ready for your self transformation accordingly. That's what I have.
Thanks for tuning in.
All
Thanks
right.
for joining us.
And with that, I guess we say goodbye for another week. Thank you so much for joining us. Please do subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit the like, thumbs up icon,
Yeah, thanks for the
and
comments.
subscribe, please. Also, if you are interested in a consultation or witchy advising or a tarot reading for yourself, you can contact me through my website, and I've left the link in the description below. So, you see that? Look, I've learned from watching other YouTube videos below. All right. Thank you very, very much for being, and we'll see you next week.
Our love goes out to you and to all the ships at sea.
Noodles.
Those are the waves.
Cheery bye.